Ordo Amoris. Sounds like a Harry Potter spell. It's not, but we're going to talk about it later in this video. Hi folks, I'm Paul, and this is my take. One of the biggest things that's always puzzled me about our modern political dichotomy is where we put our value and attention, what we uplift, appreciate, celebrate. In past generations, I think both the political left and right may have had their differences, but at the end of the day, I think both conservatives and liberals of yesteryear could proudly call themselves Americans. 50 or 60 years ago, I don't think there was much confusion about what our nation valued, what we were supposed to care about, what we were supposed to be. And unfortunately, I don't think we have that consensus anymore. These days, when comparing the platforms of the two main political parties in the United States, it's like you're looking at entirely different countries because you're looking at entirely different worldviews. The topics and issues that are important to each respective worldview, the things that they choose to focus on, to take responsibility for, protect, are almost an inverse to one another. And I don't think I've ever seen a clearer example of this in action, at least in my lifetime, than what's happening right now in the first 3 weeks of Donald Trump's second administration, most notably with what they're doing regarding the issue of immigration. Now, most of the time, while I disagree with the majority of liberal positions, I can understand where they're coming from to a certain degree. I can generally see some of the reasoning behind their beliefs. But when it comes to the issue of immigration, it's becoming harder and harder for me to understand the liberal perspective in a way that isn't at best naivete and at worst malice. This past week, the Trump administration gathered up thousands of known felons who are foreign nationals here illegally and set them up for deportation. And I'm seeing a lot of outcry from the left saying that this is wrong. How? Why? Why do you want these people in our country? Why did the prior administration do nothing about them? Why did 159 Democratic senators vote against something like the Laken Riley Act? These people come into our country, break our laws, steal, assault, rape, murder. They do untold amounts of harm to American citizens. Why wouldn't you want to do something about that? Why does it upset you that we're getting rid of these people? What I don't think a lot of people on the left understand is deporting people like this is a very moderate and compassionate reaction. If you're here illegally hurting American citizens, frankly, I think we should be able to do literally whatever we want to you. Things so frightening that you wouldn't even think about coming to America to commit crime. Now, if it isn't obvious, I'm a nationalist. And that's been a dirty word for a long time, and I don't really understand why. I'm an American for Americans. I want what is in the best interest of myself and my fellow Americans. And I do not support policies that would actively harm myself and fellow Americans. I don't support policies that would benefit people outside of America if it would do harm to people inside of America. And I don't know why some people think that that's an insane position to hold. I wouldn't expect any other nation to not prioritize their own interest. In fact, I really like seeing nationalism from people from other countries. I love it when a Japanese citizen is unapologetically Japanese or an Englishman unapologetically English. I've been to Ethiopia and met some very nationalistic Ethiopians, and they were wonderful people. I think it's great when someone can say, I am from this country, my country, we value this, this, and this. I think those things are great, and I love my people. This worldview is how we preserve things that are transcendent, things like heritage, culture. And if you value diversity of culture, of people, you should also value nationalism. Now, when it comes to examining the vast difference of these worldviews, one of the key elements I think you should ask yourself is, who are you obligated to care the most about? On most issues, but especially immigration, an American nationalist will say their duty is first and foremost to their fellow American citizens, obviously. And right now, in our current political landscape, the conservative side leans more towards the nationalistic perspective than the liberal side does. at least when it comes to this particular topic. Looking at the Biden administration and their handling of issues like immigration, whose interest was being promoted and protected in that system? It wasn't Americans. Their policies actively damaged a lot of American citizens' interests. And I'm pretty sure they were aware of this, because they could have done something about it, and they chose not to. Perhaps you could say it's compassionate to let in foreigners. And maybe even sometimes it is. But not if it's at the detriment of people who have lived here for generations. Not if it harms the people who you are most responsible for caring about. I mean, look at Springfield, Ohio. That's essentially a Haitian town now. Was it compassionate to relocate tens of thousands of foreigners to that small town? Maybe it was compassionate to the Haitians, but it wasn't compassionate to the people of Springfield. Not at all. That town's population nearly doubled in the span of about a year. And do you think they had the infrastructure or the resources to accommodate that expansion? Do you think the cultural practices that these people brought with them were compatible with American cultural practices? Who was looking out for Americans in that arrangement? Who had their interest in mind? And as Americans, I think we have a duty to be compassionate to our fellow Americans, our actual neighbors, before anyone else. Maybe you really do want to help the people of the nations. And that's great. That's noble. Maybe you could even call it moral. But you can't be moral at someone else's expense. One of the arguments I'm seeing right now that's trying to cow mainly Christians into a position that goes against their own interest is that they are not embodying the values of the Good Samaritan, which, if you're unfamiliar, is a parable from the Bible about a man traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho. And on the road there, he gets attacked by bandits. They beat him, they rob him, and they leave him for dead. And a little while later, a priest comes down the road and sees his fellow man lying there and does nothing. He keeps on walking. And then a little while later, a Levite comes, sees his fellow man on the side of the road, does nothing, and keeps walking. But then comes a Samaritan, and he sees the man. And an important element here is that Samaritans and Israelites are not the same. They were not the same people. So he likely had very little in common with this traveler. But he takes pity on the traveler. He bandages his wounds, he takes him to an inn, and tells the innkeeper to look after him until he is better and strong enough to travel again. Again, Samaritans and Israelites historically did not get along, and that's why this story is impactful. The priest and the Levite were this traveler's fellow countrymen. They were supposed to take care of their fellow man, and they didn't. But the Samaritan was merciful, and he took care of the foreigner, and that made him the better neighbor. When people point to this parable as an example for why Christians should be nothing but accepting about mass immigration, I think they fail to see that there are actually several lessons in the story. The message isn't just the Samaritan was right because he helped the traveler. This message also includes the priest and the Levite were wrong because they didn't. When applying this parable to the current issue of immigration, I see a lot of people making the claim that America, in how we've been inviting in and importing foreigners, has been like the Good Samaritan. But actually, I think we've been more like the priest and the Levite. They had a duty as this man's countrymen to help him. They had a duty to show him love and mercy, and they didn't. They were bad neighbors. And it's shameful that they did nothing. It's shameful that they actually hurt him by leaving him to die. As Americans, we have a duty to our countrymen. We have a responsibility to protect them, to keep their best interest at heart when we're making decisions. And the immigration system abdicated that duty. By flooding American towns with people who do not share our values, who do not respect our customs, we are doing our fellow Americans, our neighbors, harm. If we support a system that hurts our neighbor, even if it helps someone else, we are bad neighbors because we failed in our duty to look after our neighbor. We were like the priest and the Levite. We didn't take care of the people we were supposed to. I also think it's important to examine how the Samaritan cared for the foreigner. He didn't just dump him on the innkeeper and say, "My job's done, I did my good deed, he's your problem now." If he had done that, he would have been a bad neighbor to the innkeeper. Rather, he paid the innkeeper for his services and told him, take care of this traveler, and when he's back to full health and he can continue his journey, I will pay whatever expenses it was to get him to that point. The Good Samaritan was good because he did the right thing the right way. And I think that brings me to the topic of Ordo Amoris, which amazingly was referenced by the vice president just a few days ago. Ordo Amoris is the concept of rightly ordered love. It's essentially a hierarchy of your duties and responsibilities. Who should we be expected to care for and look after first? For me, and many other Americans, my rightly ordered love and responsibility goes first to my God, second to my wife, third my family, then my friends, then my neighbors, then my countrymen, and then people who are not my countrymen. It's a concept that's pretty easy to wrap your head around. My duty is to these people in this order, and I will offer assistance when and where I can to anyone on this list, but only if it doesn't violate my duty to those above in that order. I will help my neighbor, but not if it hurts my friends. I will help my friends, but not if it hurts my family. And I will help the foreigner, but not if it hurts my countrymen. Maybe you've seen these heat map memes that are floating around right now. And I found it incredibly eye-opening. It's really interesting because it essentially displays the Ordo Amoris of conservative thinkers versus that of liberals. And the order is inverted, where conservatives see their greatest duty being towards the protection and well-being of those closest to them. Liberals see their greatest duty being towards the protection and well-being of those furthest away. And you know what? I can actually sort of understand this perspective to a degree. You want to protect the planet above all else, because without Mother Earth, we all die. I can see the thinking behind that. But I also think you run the risk of becoming anti-human, anti-life, if you begin with the idea that your responsibility is to things most furthest from you, like the planet, trees, rocks, etc. If these things are more important to you than your countrymen, why? Well, without trees, my countrymen are dead. I'm dead. You're dead. We're all dead without trees. And I say, true, but without humanity, why does any of that matter? Who would be around to care about that? I care about my countrymen, and my countrymen need trees in order to breathe, in order to build houses. They need trees for all manner of things. So I care for and protect the trees, but I wouldn't bulldoze my countrymen's neighborhood to put in a forest because I care more about the well-being of my countrymen than I do about trees. Maybe that's an unfair framing, and if it is, I don't mean to be unfair. But the idea of there being a hierarchy of loves and responsibility, and two people having essentially the inverse of those loves and responsibilities, it's very interesting. And it explains how and why we see such a vast chasm of priorities when it comes to politics, especially when you compare Trump's second administration to Biden's. When I read about American politics back in the 50s or 60s, it really does seem like the hierarchy of loves and responsibilities were more closely shared between the two political parties. And it makes me wonder how and where it all changed. And that's probably a topic for a different video. But that's all I've got for today. What do you think about all this? What is your Ordo Amoris? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. As always, if you enjoy my content and want to see more, I would really appreciate it if you liked and subscribed. Hope you're all having a fantastic day, and I will see y'all next time.